Hello, Tyler here, and today we're going to be going over the Codex supplement for the Cult of Strife. So this comes from the Book of Rust, and basically it's just a few pages of random stuff that is additional if you take the Cult of Strife Witch Cult. So basically how this works is you can only use these things, and there's a couple random other cases for like the Stratagem and stuff where you can. But for the most part, to use these things, you have to have a detachment, so, patrol, battalion, whatever, that is just Cult of Strife. So if you were to use the Real Space Raid detachment that's in the new Codex, you wouldn't be able to use this. You'd have to have another detachment of Cult of Strife to use these things. And these add a lot to the Cult of Strife, I think, and I think it makes them very comparable or better than the Cursed Blade. So basically, just in case you didn't know, I'm just going to throw this in the front here. So the Cult of Strife, what do they do? What's their stuff? So their procession is pretty good. They always fight first. So that's if they charged. They already would. But where it's useful is, the turn after you charge. Or if the enemy charges you, you can go back and forth. And then the other part is, if they charge an enemy that has no models in engagement range, they gain +1 to their charge rolls. So this is strong in general, just like if you're charging something, you get +1 to the charge. But where it's the most useful is if you're charging out of Deep Strike, because then you only have to roll an 8 instead of a 9. So it is pretty strong. So then, their Warlord trait, I think, is one of the better damaging Witch Warlord traits. Because now, for, you have 3 Warlord, well, you can have even more than 3. I think you can have, you can have multiple succubuses with Warlord traits now with the Stratagem in the main Codex. So, even if a Warlord trait's not the best, it can still be pretty strong. So, for the Cult of Strife Warlord trait, it's just, on an unmodified hit roll of 6, you get 2 additional hits. So 1 hit turns into 3 hits. Pretty strong with certain things. The Cult of Strife Relic, their base relic, the File Bouquet, sucks in my opinion. At the start of each turn, you just roll a dice and you get 1 more drug until the end of the turn. I think that's pretty bad. And, it can double up and stuff, but it's just random. And there's better relics. But then they do have one of the best stratagems, which is just 2 CP at the end of the phase. Unit witches can shoot or attack again, and that's very, very strong for 2 CP. If it was 3 CP, it'd be but for 2 CP, it's really good. But now on to the supplement. That's just to give you the base, so you know about what the Cult of Strife's about. So, in this new book, there's basically 3 things they get. New Warlord traits, new relics, new stratagems, and I'm going to go through them and just sort of tell you if they're good, what's going on with them, and the such. So Warlord traits. One of them's good, one of them is meh, and then one of them's not very good. So the good one, Competitive Edge. I don't know if I'm going to run any with this, but I definitely see how it's very strong. So each time this Warlord fights, if all of its attacks, so it has to put all of its attacks into one enemy. But basically, any of its attacks that didn't damage it, it just gets to redo. So, if it attacks with, it's 6 attacks and only 1 does damage, it gets to make 5 more attacks after that. So this is just really strong because, it just guarantees more damage, almost, because being able to redo all those failed attacks just makes you so much more consistent. So this is a pretty good one. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but I think it's definitely one of the better ones overall you can take. So number 2, Unparalleled Agility. This is one of the only 2 Succubus Warlord traits that makes them tankier. This one is you just subtract 1 from the attack's hit roll and wound roll. So this is good because even if they're just getting shot at, you do that. So, it just makes them tankier. I don't think you need the succubuses to be tankier. I think you're going to want them to be killier. But it does at least does something unique. Master Executioner. Whenever it makes an attack, you can reroll the wound roll. This sucks because, I mean, this first one's way better because you just get to redo everything again. So this is just like a smaller version of this almost. So this one sucks. I think this first one's just much better. And in the main codex, there's warlord traits that are better than this one. So on to the 4 relics. Morvane's Agonizer. I don't think this one's very good. Basically just an Agonizer with... but whenever you hit with it, as long as you don't hit a vehicle or a monster, it just can't fall back no matter what. So I'm sure there's some tactical use to this, but I don't really think it's that amazing. And one thing I do want to note is that of these 4 relics, you can spend 1 CP. So you can have 1 relic normally, and then you can spend 2 CP, 1 each, to get 2 more relics from the main codex. But this one, in addition, lets you put one of these 4 relics onto the Hecatrix, which is the leader of a unit of witches. So it is good to acknowledge that, yeah, you can put one of these on for only 1 more CP into just one of your witch squads. So, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could put this Agonizer on, and you could have it so that a unit just can't run away from the witches. But I really don't think it's that amazing. It just doesn't do much damage. The only special thing is the no fallback, and I really don't think it's that useful. Like, it seems like it would be useful, but I don't think it's going to be. Garland of Spite. This one's pretty cool. I think the second part sort of sucks. Just that attack automatically hits. I mean, it's sort of like, you're already hitting pretty good on 3+ or 2+ anyways. But the first part's pretty interesting, where at the start of your fight phase, select 1 enemy model with an engagement range of this model, have that model's attack characteristic. So this isn't going to be good unless you're fighting like a big, tanky character model or Mortarion or whatever. But, oh no, it's excluding monster. But, against... I'm not sure if Mortarion's a monster, actually, but against big tanky models like Demon Princes and stuff, this would be really good, because that's going to be, you're going to have double the number of witches left at the end then if you have their attacks. So, it's an okay one. This is definitely one that, you can sort of counterpick before the game. But yeah, it's interesting at least. The Glaive Exquisite. This one's okay. It just gives you another Relic Glaive. +2 strength, -5 AP, which is the really cool part, and then 2 damage. The special thing is, if you go after people with leadership 8 or more, you add 1 to the wound roll. That's pretty good, Space Marines, if they're toughness 4, you're going to be wounding them on 2s then. That's pretty strong. You're just going to go right through their save and kill them. But at the end of the phase, if you didn't attack someone with leadership 8 or more, you suffer a mortal wound. So this would not be an amazing one to put on the the Hecatrix. This is when you're going to want to put on a succubus. And I think it does have a lot of competition, because I think that the Master Succubus Glaive, Relic Glaive, I think that one's really strong, and I think it's just going to beat out this one. So this one definitely has uses, and I think it's okay, but I think a couple of the other glaives are better. And then Dark Lotus Toxin. This one is very, very strong. You can do a couple really stupid things with this one. The main thing you can do with this one is on a succubus. If you give them the Razor Flails, that doubles the number of attacks they make, and put this on it, because it has to be basically you add 1 to the strength and damage characteristics of all melee weapons the bearer is equipped with. So if you give a succubus the Razor Flail, you give them the Warlord trait where whenever they roll a 6 to wound, I believe, you do the damage characteristic of that weapon in mortal wounds. And then you give them this +1 attack drug. They're going to have 14 attacks because it's 6 + 1 doubled. And then 6 is the wound, do 2 mortal wounds. That's just very strong. So I think this is a very strong option on a succubus. And I think it could also be strong on a Hecatrix too, depending on what they're equipped with. Because the strength wouldn't really matter on an Agonizer, but like on a Power Sword or something, I could see you using this one. I think it would be worth 1 CP. So basically, going over this again, Morvane's Agonizer sort of sucks. Glaive Exquisite, Garden of Spite were okay. Dark Lotus Toxin is very good. So on to the stratagems. Some of these stratagems are very, very good. So Art of the Kill. So when a Cult of Strife unit from your army is selected to fight, you just get to reroll the wound roll if it's a melee attack. So for 2 CP for a unit that has 10 or less models, 3 CP with the unit for a unit with 11 or more models, this is very strong. A lot of the because you can fish for 6s on your wound rolls for the Blade Storm. I think a couple like the Relic Warlord trait combinations, you need the wound rolls. This is good. And then even just in general, 2 CP to reroll your wound rolls is not like super awful. It's strong. So pretty good stratagem there. Dance of Death. This one basically lets you move in advance, fall back, or charge through any terrain through models and terrain features. You know, they can't finish on them. So basically, this is sort of like the Harlequin's thing. The next one's going to be like a Harlequin thing, too. You know, good in specific situations. Doesn't really matter in others, but I think it's a very strong option to have if you need to do that. So this is a really good stratagem for 1 point. You're not always going to use it, but when you do, it's going to feel really awesome. So Invigorated by Evisceration. Really love the word evisceration. That means to, I believe, pull someone's guts out or something like that. I don't know. But this stratagem, 1 CP, basically, if a Cult of Strife infantry or biker unit kills a enemy unit, it just gets a 4-up invuln save until the next turn. For 1 CP, I think this is pretty strong, because basically, you know, if your witches beat like a unit of guardsmen to death, then they're just out in the open possibly and can just get shot to death. With this, it at least gives them a 4-up invuln save to, you know, stand a chance. You're not always going to use this one, but, you know, it could definitely come in clutch. Ooh, especially if, you know, like Reavers or Helions, that could be good for them, because they don't have a 4-up invuln save at all. So, you know, they kill something, you know, and then boom, they're even tankier with their, if you give them toughness 5. So pretty awesome stratagem, again, for 1 CP. 2 CP, the Blade Well Placed. Basically, in the fight phase, one of your Cult of Strife units gets +1 AP until end of turn. I think 2 CP is a little much for it, but I mean, +1 CP is good. What this is going to be best used for is if, you know, you're just going super crazy with something, you know, with like the Art of the Kill to reroll the wounds, and the Cult of Strife basic stratagem that lets a witch cult fight 2 times, because they get this on both. I don't know how much I like it for 2 CP, but in certain circumstances, having that extra AP is going to be awesome. So basically, Deadly Exemplar, 1 CP. Cult of Strife Succubus. When it kills an enemy monster or character with a melee attack, all of your Cult of Strife units get to count as being within its Brides of Death or ability. So basically, if you have a Succubus, kill an enemy monster or character, you spend 1 CP, all of your Cult of Strife units get the reroll ones, even if they're not by a Succubus. Not always sure if it's going to be worth it, but depending on the amount of Succubuses you have and the Witch Cult units you have, how heavy you lean into them. But I mean, it could be good. It's nice to have, but I don't think it's super important. Flawless Approach. Again, a very specific stratagem that can be super, super clutch in certain situations. So, you got a Cult of Strife unit, and it's charging. For 1 CP, you get to pick whether enemy units cannot fire Overwatch at it, or enemy units cannot hold steady or stet to defend. The second part's not as important, but the Overwatch is pretty awesome. You know, if you have your Witch Cult units charging something with flamethrowers, that would have a pretty deadly auto hit Overwatch, or like some of the Tau stuff that just has crazy1 CP and you don't even got to worry about it. So, good, it just depends when. Pick them apart. This is just sort of like the one in the core book where during your movement phase, one of your units can fall back and then it can shoot and charge. The one in the core book I think is 1 CP and it can fall back. And I think it's core only though. I'm not 100% sure, but they can fall back for and charge. They can fall back and shoot or charge for 1 CP, or for 2 CP they can do both. For 2 CP you just get to do both. So I mean, certain circumstances, yeah, this is pretty good. Other times it doesn't really matter, but I think it's nice to have for 2 CP. And then the Hexatrix of the Crucible. This is the one where you can just give a Hecatrix model one of these 4 relics. And I don't know if I'd always be doing it, but I mean the Garland of Spite, or basically the Garland of Spite, because you might even put the Dark Lotus Toxin on a Succubus. But I mean, I think it's definitely something to consider for only 1 CP. So, with all this stuff, do I think it's worth taking a Cult of Strife detachment by itself? So that means you gotta have a detachment that's not a real space raid, because it has to be just their own detachment, and it means you have to be Cult of Strife, which I think is probably the second. Arguably, it and the Cursed Blade are the 2 best. Cursed Blade with the +1 strength and the 6s to save and melee do a mortal wound. I think that's a little bit stronger base than just fight first +1 to your charge. But I think with everything else added, they're at least equal. So I think you can pick either one and feel fine. And I almost think with all these stratagems and relics and warlord traits, I think that the Cursed Blade might be better just because of those. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth it to run Cult of Strife just for this, even if you just have to run another patrol. Because I mean, the thing is, another patrol, that's just a Succubus and a unit of witches. That's under 200 points, so you can do that easy, even if you do have a real space raid detachment. So yeah, I think it's worth it. Do I think you should buy this book just for 3 pages? No, not really. I think you should just look it up and look to see what they do, because it's just 3 little things of rules. But I think the rules are good if you're using Cult of Strife, and I think you definitely can and not feel bad. I think they are good. So yeah, so I rate this as something you really should look into if you're playing witch cults, because I think it's pretty darn strong. Yeah, so that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day, and let me know if there's anything in particular you want to see.